you very much, Stephen. I know it's late in the day and there's drinks outside, so I'm not going to, don't worry, it's not an hour-long presentation or anything like that. And it's been a real pleasure being here, not just because the launch of Compete is so important to all of us in terms of, I think Charlie had the word right, it's not our digital strategy, but helping clients in a digitally enabled world. I'll come back to talk about why Compete is so important. But it's also been a real pleasure to learn a ton of stuff. I've obviously learned more about Charlie than I knew even when we worked together years and years ago. And one of the nice things is that you can sit at the back and you can actually, as he's talking, see who the other 4 people are that he's following. And I won't embarrass him by naming the other 4. And I should say to Charlie that he's got an ambition in terms of recruiting someone, and my ambition at the end of this talk is to find a way of getting Charlie back into Kantar. So maybe we can just swap somewhere there. I've learned that obviously Eric isn't a great name for a CEO, unless obviously it worked somewhat at Google. But and I did try the blue Kai thing as you were talking, and on my iPad it's got no information about me. Which actually I think is much more worrying than having some information about me. So I'm really disturbed now that on Blue Kai there's nothing about me. So what I wanted to do is I mean, you've heard a lot about kind of some client strategies and some media agency strategies and some great stuff from Google and LinkedIn, and there's a ton of stuff that I could cover about clients, and I'm not going to go into that. And we all know the way that clients are being affected in very, very different ways in terms of digital specifically. Nor am I mean, the suggestion from Nick, who's our Chief Digital Officer, was to actually talk about how digital affects me personally. And he even, it's the one slide that I took from him, he even kind of sent me a chart where he had nicked my iPad and done a screenshot of it, and then and wanted me to talk about how digital affects me personally. And there's a ton of stuff actually that I think is quite interesting, not in terms of the millions of, the sheer scale of the numbers and the millions of tweets and the millions of people on Facebook and all that stuff, but at a very individual level, the way that digital is changing each of us as people. And if I was going to go down this route, I mean, I would talk about how I don't buy newspapers anymore, how my shopping has changed completely, how I can actually consume media from my home country abroad to an extent that I could never before. And in a way, I've become less internationalist in terms of my media consumption, because I can listen to the radio programs that I want when I'm traveling. I can read the newspapers that I want when I'm traveling. So in a way, it's enabled me to take a bit of a bubble with me wherever I go. And from an internal communications point of view, we haven't talked about LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook from an internal point of view. But it does, in an organization with 28,000 people, enable you to make connections and learn things about what's going on, about individual clients, and get involved in the places that you should, in a way that you just couldn't through established hierarchies and ways of communicating with people. So huge impact. So I'm not going to do that. What I thought I'd do is really just give you a perspective on how the launch of Compete fits into a kind of research and insight ecosystem, and why it is really that important for us going forward. And I'll start with, I think, the thing that scares clients the most. And you've heard a lot this afternoon about some huge numbers, about the availability of just an enormous amount of data. And I would say that for most of our clients, that is actually scary rather than anything else. Most of our clients look at that huge amount of data and are paralyzed by it. There is so much data, and you saw the chart that Casper just put up at the end, and I think I've got an even, and that's a nicer version of it. But this kind of fragmentation of data is by and large scary for clients. Most clients sit in places where they've got no idea what to do with it. And I think it's no surprise that over the last 6 months or so, 6 to 9 months, we've got a large number of our major clients who are now looking at data strategy as something very separate from research strategy or advertising strategy or marketing strategy. And actually they're coming to us, and I say us, I don't just mean to Kantar, I'm saying to the collection of the agencies that they work with, and they're coming to us and saying, we would like to have a conversation about what our data strategy ought to be. Because this is quite terrifying for most clients. So I think the background that clients are operating in is one where they need to have a data strategy. Why do they need to have a data strategy? I think there's two things in particular that are really exercising clients at the moment. One is a slide that some of you will have seen, and it's a slide that Procter & Gamble used a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, to actually try to describe what they're attempting to do from a research and an insight point of view. And I'll explain it because it's not as self-explanatory as P&G or we would have liked it to have been. But really what they were saying was, at the time, they spent the vast majority of their budget here in terms of evaluating what had happened. So it might have been evaluating what people thought about their advertising. It might have been evaluating what people felt about their brands. But it was largely rear mirror stuff, and it was understanding about what people felt about an aspect of P&G. And their view at the time, and their view even more now, is that while this is important, it shouldn't be 90% of their budget, it should be 50% of their budget, and the real growth in terms of where they spend their money and their time ought to come at either end. This end is what they called sense and respond, and other clients have got different names for it, but I would say every single client is focused on this. What does this mean? This means understanding in real time what's happening to their business. It might be to their corporate reputation, it might be to their brands, and doing something about it. So rather than having data which comes later, it's about having data in real time and insights in real time which allow them to do something differently in terms of their marketing strategy. And that's a very, very different approach. And I think where that comes from is a feeling that for a lot of clients, getting things directionally right, getting things 80% right now, and making a call on it is actually more important than being 100% accurate in 6 months' time. Now, that doesn't apply to everything. There are parts of our business, there are parts of the Kantar media business that Jean-Michel runs, which are about audience measurement, where actually knowing how many people have watched a program on TV, it's incredibly important to be accurate, 100%. And there are parts of our business where we're doing social work for the government, where we're asking about people's experience of crime, for example. We run the British Crime Survey in the UK. The government actually wants that information to be accurate, saying that we're kind of about right in terms of where people are in terms of crime is not good enough. You actually want to spend the time so that you get the right crime statistics. So I'm not suggesting that all insights, all research are moving towards the 100% accuracy doesn't matter. I'm just saying that for a lot of clients in a number of situations, being directionally right now, being able to make a call on should I adjust my advertising, should I change my media weighting, should I put more money into here or not, should I actually have a conversation with a retailer about what I do with that product which is on shelf now. Having this kind of direction and accuracy, but having it now is much more important than being much more accurate in 6 months' time. So coming back to the kind of P&G view of the world, which, as I say, I think is one which you kind of heard the undertones in the way that Charlie talked about the world. And while I wouldn't agree by any means with what he says about Millward Brown, you know where that's coming from in terms of a desire to have something faster and more actionable. So I think that's the world in which a lot of our clients are moving, real-time decision-making. And this is much more, again, not reacting to what's going on and not just saying, well, this is what consumers tell us. This is much more about creating a future and changing the way that consumers behave. And again, if I just come back to a conversation that Charlie and I were having at the break, if you think about some of the SAB markets in which they are very dominant, it's a very different thought process you need to have. It's not about switching consumers from one brand to another, because you already have most of the market. It's about creating new usage occasions. It's creating a different way of looking at the category. It's thinking completely differently about how you go to market. And that's not about just responding to what people think about your brand now. It's about thinking, how do I actually create a very different future? So I'd say that's the environment in which most of our clients are actually thinking, behaving, having to deal with. It's one where they want to respond much faster to the environment, and it's one which is much more about creating the future as opposed to simply saying, this is the future that we've got, and how do we respond to it? And that poses lots of challenges. Both of those things poses lots of challenges to the way that we as a company think, the way that people are comfortable. And no one likes to think that they're not accurate in terms of what they say. You always want to be accurate. But it does mean that speed is a much more important part of everything that we have to offer now than ever before. And it's not just a kind of question of let's do what we were doing but do it faster. It's also us and our clients being very kind of grown up and honest and explicit about saying we can't do everything that we were doing as fast as we were doing it. What can we do in the time that you've got?